This
Or you just-
conference will now be recorded.
Okay,
They
we
make me
got
want to do my
started.
hair.
You all look perfect. Teresa, I'd love it if, as a newbie, you introduced yourself to our little group.
Oh, sure. So my name is Parisa Koshrapur. Most recently, I was president of Transplant Diagnostics at Thermo Fisher. And about 6 months ago, I decided to retire. I'm sorry. So but I retired from Thermo Fisher about 6 months ago. Basically, my experience is mostly about business management and managing divisions or business units within the life science and diagnostics, and of course, operation, quality, R&D, and all that good stuff. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, and are you,
yeah,
as a retiree, are you if somebody needs some help, I'll take are you actively looking for consulting work or passively or just checking in?
So one, I want to continue to stay connected to the community. Absolutely, if anytime I can help a colleague or an organization, more than happy to help in any way I can and volunteer. I'm also looking to see if there are opportunities to be a member of the board. So especially for startup, given the fact that I started my career in a startup that was successful and eventually became part of Thermo Fisher. So so that's a little bit about me.
Okay, lovely. And Corey, I know you think you're sharing your webcam, but in fact you have it blocked off and you are a black box.
Yeah, I know. I see that, and I don't understand what's going on. Any advice? First time trying to do this.
Are you on a Mac or are you on a window?
I'm on a Windows 10.
Then I have no suggestions for you. All I know is I had to, I undocked, because I was traveling, and I redocked, and my video wasn't working, and I restarted, and then my video worked.
When in doubt, reboot.
Yeah.
When in doubt, reboot. Got it. Yeah, I just tested my camera just a second ago to make sure it's working and all that good stuff, and seemed like it was there, but it just doesn't want to send it to GoToMeeting apparently.
Okay, well, we will turn it over to our star of the morning, Ms. Jan Gates. And I've known Jan for a number of years, but we finally met in May at the last 10X. It was worth the wait. She gave a great presentation about packaging. And my main takeaway was, wow, there's a lot to packaging. I don't know anything. And if I have any questions about packaging, I should just call Jan. That was basically what I think you said.
Some type of packaging engineer is good for you because most people think they know it until they actually start trying to do it.
Right. You put it in a box. How hard can that be? So I actually, Jan has, I'm sure, prepared lots of things and frankly didn't need to prepare anything at all because she's been doing this for 35 years. And she, I understand, is responsible for any microwave popcorn you may have ever enjoyed.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Microwave popcorn, lady.
That's my only claim to fame that's got patented was inventing microwave popcorn. So they gave me $10 and a thank you very much.
Only, that's pretty cool.
And all the popcorn you could eat. Yes, I hope.
Well, I really got sick of it trying to set it up and get everything working right. We were popping 55-gallon bags of popcorn in all sorts of microwaves because there wasn't any standards on microwaves then, and I can't really stand the smell of it now.
And she's not dating herself, by the way. So, this was a very near-in microwave. This wasn't just the advent of microwaves. But I wanted to start with a pressing question, and you and I have talked about this. We talked about it on Slack a bit, and you explained it to me, and still it kind of went over my head a little bit. So let me give the group a real packaging example that I have with a client who has a brilliant product. It's a breakthrough innovation, and it comes in a liquid form, and it can be sold not as a medical device or as a medical device if it gets cleared or approved as a medical device, which it has not yet done.
General
And I was
alcohol
given-
has been available for a while.
Okay, fair enough, Rick.
And it's a little
Um,
more
sorry,
than
go ahead.
alcohol, but
Sorry, I'm sorry. Couldn't resist.
And as I understood it, one of the main things keeping them from clearance was they had yet to pass their drop test. And they have a very well-meaning team trying to get it done on their own. And I said, oh, you got to talk to my friend Jan. And they're like, okay, we'll talk to Jan. And I got, I was talking with Jan. I said, how's it going? And she said, oh, well, they're kind of delaying. I'm like, okay, well, I know this is important for them, so let me go see what's up. And I spoke with the CEO, and it turns out that he had submitted something to FDA and got back results. And he told me that, yes, I'm interested in talking with Jan, but we got results from FDA, and there are 7 more pressing things for me to look at right now, so I'll get to it. And I relayed this to Jan, and I said, how should I respond to this? Because I guess they submitted with whatever they had. I'm not sure about how they addressed that drop test. So I don't know what they did with packaging, but one little aside is I'm an investor, so I have a vested interest in this working out well. I want to see them paired with the best talent I know on the topic. And Jan, you said something that I'll not even attempt to paraphrase. What was your answer to this? They have 7 issues, but this one is kind of lingering.
well, they have 7 issues. The issue they're having with the drop test is fairly easy to fix in packaging aspects. But if they have submitted a report for approval from the FDA and said they did the B4169, which is an ASTM test that most people use, when they submitted that, they are stating that they passed the D4169 testing, which says the product cannot be hurt or
Let me stop you there
have a
because I
problem.
don't know that they made that claim unless you're telling me there's no way they could have submitted without making that claim.
They're
Is that
not
the-
supposed to be able to submit anything without making a claim that they have passed some kind of packaging test. In this case, they said they were using D4169 to me. If you are saying you did a packaging test, you have to say what kind of packaging test you're doing, because there's several different types you can do. They all say that you have to pass without product damage in the test itself. If you have not passed that test and you've submitted in for approval with your product and you haven't passed that test, you are actually, according to the FDA people I talked to, because I wanted to make sure I understood them right, yeah, they might not ask you for data when you submit it, but they will probably ask you for data when they inspect you. And if you have submitted the data saying you've done your packaging test and you haven't passed, you are actually committing fraud and having an adulterated product you're trying to put on the market.
Good
And that
point.
can get you in sort of trouble.
Yeah.
That's a worse answer than I had hoped for.
And they do look at dates when they're doing inspections. So if you have submitted something and you don't get your testing done until afterwards, that could be an issue too.
We'll take turns because I'm sure Michelle has something to say and I'm sure Larry has something to say about this. But Michelle, you first because you're chomping at the bit.
So it's a recognized consensus standard. So the FDA expects that you have followed all the recognized consensus standards that are applicable to your product, period. Then that's exactly what Jan is saying, in a different way, is that the FDA, whether they say so or not, expect you to follow it because it was an unsaid rule that you followed everything that was generally applicable to your product.
A better way to approach it, if you don't meet the standard, is to, in your submission, address packaging and say you're going to confirm that the packaging is appropriate for the product itself and describe what you're going to do, and or tell them what you have done without mentioning the standard. Because you can't, the standards, if you use the standards, you know you're in good shape because FDA recognizes them. But you have a choice. If you feel that the standard is overkill or something, you can. But what you don't want to do is apparently what that company did was say they passed the standard and didn't, because as a former FDA investigator, I did data verification audits on companies that had submitted 510Ks, and I always looked at their packaging, and I always know what they had submitted. So that sage advice that you gave about that being fraud, and you do not want to lie to the FDA.
Yeah, and they don't actually have to say they passed it. They just have to say they used it, the standard.
Right. Well, the assumption, of course, is that if
Okay,
it
well,
doesn't
they
that's-
passed.
the standard pass, they
Well,
fail.
I just want to reiterate what Larry just said. Rule number one, don't lie to the FDA.
Yeah, I get that. And, just because you've all sufficiently made me nervous, I just heard a loophole that Larry said that you've got to say you used the standard. You don't need to claim you passed the test.
Well, no,
No,
I wouldn't
if
even
you-
mention that. If you mention the standard, they're going to think you're going to comply with the standard. It's best not to mention any standard at all. Just go in and describe how you're going to qualify your packaging, and see if you can convince FDA that you've done a sufficient job without using the standard.
Okay, well, to be clear, I haven't seen the submission, and frankly, I wouldn't know how to read one, but I will share this recording with them.
Yeah, what I have done with submissions where we've had packaging is do what he said, say that we've had issues with a certain part of a standard and we are addressing that. And that should be done before we get approval back or they say, yeah, fine, you can put it on the market. And then you have to prove it too. It's a harder standard to meet, but you can do it that way.
But you have to prove, if you're not going to do a recognized consensus standard, you have to prove that what you're doing is appropriate for the risk level of your product or is better than the recognized consensus standard. And so there is a case to be made either way. And that's where a lot of people.
Teresa?
Yeah, I think the other place to look at, I'm sure as part of your design transfer process, at every milestone, you're looking at the risk assessment. So when you're looking at a manufacturing and packaging, they must do some type of risk assessment. And that's part of the shipping or sort of integrity of the packaging during the shipment and draw. And you have to look at that and see what risk the team outlined and how they were looking at mitigating. There are companies that go by the standard. I think everybody sort of commented on that. But if you're not looking at a specific standard, it is important to look at the packaging and the risk assessment around that, and how the team thought to mitigate those risks, what type of validation they did, what type of testing they did. It's important to look at that as well.
I love that you jumped right in, and good morning, Chopper.
Yeah, I have found when I work with a lot of companies, they don't actually do their risk assessments properly for packaging. There's a lot of reasons something can break, and they don't separate out what those issues are to be able to address them properly either. So you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, but if you do your shipping validation the right way, so it's about the temperature control on all sort of extreme temperatures and time of the year. But as part of your shipping, you look at the integrity of the box. Does the box get dented? That the content isn't safe? I mean, I haven't seen the packaging, so I don't know. But I'm assuming that when the team is looking at the packaging design, they're looking at all the risk assessment. At least, I've audited other businesses. Yeah, I've audited other businesses within the Thermo Fisher. I mean, we look at their design, and I don't know, based on my recent FDA and ISO audits, they actually pay a lot of attention to risk assessment and how we looked at possible risk and mitigation. But everybody's experience is different. But I think you're getting pretty much the same consensus about looking at what the team had done and what they need to do next, I suppose, from what they claim.
And that was one of my points too, was people sometimes say, oh, we're going to follow 4169 blindly without actually looking to see they need to.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's an issue.
I always say that it's very important to put a lot of specs and claim. That's very easy to do, but it takes act of God to trying to take it out. So look at everything, what it means before you claim or you start doing the testing.
So I've got one question. In all my experience, packaging usually ends up being the last thing or one of the later things that's done in the development cycle. You're working on the product, we'll get around to packaging when we get around to it, and inevitably you got all the rest you want to submit. If you're in process, but you don't have the packaging validation completed, is that going to are you going to get the refuse to accept from the FDA, and they're not even going to review the submission? Or I know best practice is you got to have that completed before you submit for 510K, but it doesn't always, I guess, happen that way. And I'm curious what thoughts are in that respect.
Well, in my experience, technically, when you submit the data for FDA, right, you have actually used the product in your clinical testing, depending on what class it is. You've submitted the data based on the product that has actually been transferred to manufacturing. And if it's been transferred to manufacturing and manufactured, right, by your operation, not necessarily your R&D, because that's the product that's going to your clinical testing, you've done all of that. I've not seen in recent years, right, so I'm talking about the past 10 years, maybe 15, that you're submitting something to FDA without doing all of that. That's my experience, but I don't know if others have different experience.
Corey, it occurs to me,
go ahead.
That this is your first time joining us on these calls too. So would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Corey Wilson. So got my own firm, Insight Consulting Solutions. But it's based on a couple decades experience doing new product development, engineering, a lot of it in the orthopedic space, but pretty much whole career in the medical device industry, bringing new products to market. So, but now out on my own with my own firm.
And as your marketing friend, we're going to work on that elevator pitch, aren't we?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Good. Jan, would you take us to another point? Or I want to quickly ask, my friend Brent there is bringing something to market, and it's a plastic thing and it goes in a box. How hard can that be?
You're asking me that question?
No, I'm asking
I'd
Jan,
like to know what kind of plastic piece it is, and then I can give you a better idea.
You're welcome to show the prototype, Brent. This is, I'm playing the role of an underinformed manufacturer, and if I were manufacturing, I assure you that this would be an easy role for me to play. He's created this fantastic innovation. He's going to show it to you now, and it goes in a box. So to me, that very much feels like a last thing to do. Put it in the box.
Okay, there's packaging. This is not the.
Is it sterilized or non-sterilized?
No, it's medically clean. It's not sterile.
Okay.
That's the way it's being used. It's also 510K exempt as a device. So I don't know, does that change your packaging requirements? I mean, or is there a general packaging requirement for all medical products?
The general packaging requirements in that you don't have to have as strong a justification for your packaging when you go down in classification.
This is the part that we package in the plastic, it's plastic, of course, it's packaged in an auto bag, it's labeled properly, and it's shipped 50 in a container, a cardboard box. We've contracted an outside firm to do a packaging study to make sure that they'll do drop testing, shake testing, heat, all that. And then part of what we're doing is we're shipping boxes of product cross country several ways, bringing it back in the shop, and then retesting all of the product to make sure that it hasn't in some way suffered some sort of degradation in performance.
So you're doing real-time testing instead of lab testing?
I'm not sure what you just asked me.
Real-time testing means you're
Yeah.
actually shipping product from one side of the country to the other.
Yeah.
And do you monitor what those shipments are for temperature, humidity, shock, and vibration?
Yep.
You do.
Well,
You have.
you're talking about putting sensors in the box itself?
Yes.
I don't know if we do that or not. I mean,
Well, why I'm asking that, I don't like real-time testing because you don't know what conditions your product is actually going in and experiencing when it's out there.
But we also do lab testing. So this is going through a full field, sort of a full series of lab testing as well.
Okay, so we go back to your pouch that you're putting it in. Do you have any trouble with temperature, humidity on your product?
No, it's all plastic parts, so it's impervious.
That's good. So you're not worried about a seal at all and whether the product falls out?
A seal. It's sealed.
Seal
It is
on the
sealed.
top. Yeah, but how are you sealing it? Have you validated you can get a consistent seal all the time? These are questions I would ask. Have you validated you've got?
Just for those that don't spend their life in packaging, why would I care about that?
Because if that seal breaks when you're shipping it, because you have a foil pouch there, the product can come out and other stuff can get into it. So if you don't know what your seal strength is and know that you can consistently make it, you can have a problem when you ship it and it goes up in the air over a mountain or something like that.
Okay.
Now, when I work with a lot of terminally sterilized medical devices, that gets really, really critical, and I have to validate the machine is good as well as the calibration is right, so we can make sure we have a consistent seal going all the way across. We never have it explode when it goes over a mountain. I found that out working in foods. Luckily, it was foods when we were shipping Swiss Miss over the top of the Continental Divide, and all the lids blew off.
That's part of why we're shipping it. We're shipping East and West Coast.
But you can get that in your laboratory tests at the highest amount you want to go.
Okay. I assume that they're doing all that. In fact,
That's a big assumption.
Yeah, it's a big assumption. Somebody wants to say something.
Michelle, we recognize you.
Yeah. So I had a customer one time that had a contract manufacturer that had already done a lot of testing for him prior to me being involved. And his shipping and packaging testing involved them putting this sterilized sealed product on like UPS and shipping it to the East Coast, and then having somebody on the East Coast ship it back to the West Coast. And then they called that like real time, and that it was going to experience all the possible environmental conditions being shipped, like air shipped and then ground shipped. So they air shipped it out, then they ground transported it back, and they said that was better than the D standard was it 4169? They said that was better than the standard. And so that was the first thing that the FDA said in the submission was like, please use an actual standard with known conditions or submit all the temperature data that actually happened when you did your real-time shipment distribution made up.
We spend a lot of time setting up standards, trying to figure out what is the worst case for shock, vibration, temperature, humidity, drop testing, and that stuff. I work on the committees where we're actually looking at data from all over the world trying to put it into a standard so we can figure out what the worst case situation is.
I love that statement just right there. We spend time actually looking at data.
Yeah, that's why it's a consensus standard.
So just so once again, because for us that develop products, the most boring thing on our list is packaging. No offense intended. Okay.
That's why I've been doing it for so many years, because I love it. It's fun.
I know, but it's not something that necessarily grabs the entrepreneur very hard. Here's a question for you then. So I will check and see what our contract with this company is, because they're doing a full series of lab and real-time testing. So they should be following the 4169 standard.
Well, but 4169 has 13 different cycles to pick from.
Oh, geez. Okay.
There's different levels of testing you can do. So you got to have somebody that actually looks at your distribution system and figure out how to test it properly. Because if you just say, do worst case totally on 4169, what we found, they call it assurance level 1 is what a lot of medical device people use. Well, they never tested assurance level 1. They only tested assurance level 2. And somebody said, oh, that's not enough for us. So they stuck in this level 2, and then the people making tax said, oh, you're testing it too much, so they stuck in level 3. So you've got to have somebody that knows what they're looking at. You can use an ISTA 3A, which is a little bit easier to understand, but that's for a single parcel post, and you've got to make sure you're actually shipping it that way. And I haven't finished my questions for your product.
Go ahead.
Are you bulk packing this into your cases, or do you have little divisions? So if you bulk packing,
what we have each is in a poly bag. It's wrapped in a protective bag and put into a standard box.
Each of your foil pouches is put in a plastic bag.
This is a plastic bag.
Okay, that's the plastic bag.
We put 50. Now, we ship 50 in a box.
So how do you know how that interacts with each other in your worst case shipping? How do you know if your shock and vibration doesn't hit a natural frequency, so you're taking chips out of your product? Do you know what it fails at? What temperature it causes problems? You got polypropylene, it's going to crack when you freeze. So
it's ABS.
Excuse me?
It's ABS, not polypropylene.
Oh, ABS. So you're doing, so you can only get little chips here and there. But that means as the pouches break apart, they can actually hit the other pouches and cause damage in shipment. Maybe you need a layer in between some of your products, a piece of corrugated in between the pouches of product to make sure they stay a little more separated. I don't know. I'd have to look at the whole thing. Now, do you know your case has got the top load it needs for the way it's going to be shipped? Are you shipping full pallets or individual cases? That makes a difference on how you're going to do. Now, does your labeling last? Have you done your test showing that for whatever your expiration date, your label's not going to fall off, the ink's not going to smear?
Yeah,
you know what?
The one question I answered, yes, it's fine on the ink.
I am visualizing like a cartoon where, Brent shows up and he's like, hi, how's it going? And Jan's like, slap, slap, slap. And
No, I don't mean to do that, but that's what I have what's called a design and development sheet so that we can make sure we understand the risks that are necessary or possible for your product so that it can be addressed with the packaging.
My answer is I'm hoping that the person on my team that does that, who's contracted with an outside agency to do all that, has covered all those bases. But you know what I'm going to do today, don't you? I'm going to.
That's just the packaging itself.
I'm going to upload this video, and you can have him watch this entire part.
Yeah, well, that's just the package of the product itself. With medical devices, you've got incoming, receiving, and warehousing of your individual components that you've got to worry about and make sure that's all set up properly. And then when you're shipping out, how you're going to ship it. If you start changing your shipper or your shipping lanes, you've got to evaluate how that's going to affect your product too. So there's also things you have to put on the outside of your case. There's issues of human factors now that is being pushed by everybody for medical devices and pharmaceuticals, making sure people can actually open your package right, take out the unit and use it properly. That is something the FDA is actually sending product or submissions back to people saying you haven't done your human factor testing. You can't put this on the market yet.
Here's a question, Jen. Given that we're pre-market approval exempt, how much of all this applies to us?
I have to check. I don't usually, I just know the packaging actually doesn't change for the different things that you're looking at, even if I'm in foods, if I'm in detergents, if I'm in pharmaceuticals or packaging. These are all things that you have to do. And I don't, to me, it's the same whether you do preclinicals or later, because you're still putting people at risk that the product isn't going to work right because the packaging wasn't correct.
Chopper says it's a risk-based approach. So especially when you're in a lower regulated product, it's a risk-based approach of what you apply, when you apply it, and how you apply it. And it has to make sense for the level of controls you should have based on the product functionality and the patient risk for your product.
Let me ask a question here. And I'm asking a provocative question on purpose because I'm confident that there will at some point in time be someone watching this video thinking, you know, hey, that guy already has his 510K clearance and he's ready to go to market. So what's his real risk here if he does nothing else? He's already got a stamp of approval. So what happens? Something breaks in shipping, he'll send another one. Why are we having this conversation?
It's called customer satisfaction. In other words, if you have a good risk management file, you've assessed your entire package as well as the process and the design and everything, and you know the implications of any failures. And as Michelle said, on a risk base, you'll know what the implication is if your package seal breaks. Well, if it's not a sterile product, it doesn't matter. I can tell you about a $60,000 mistake in packaging that one of my clients just made. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a startup company and it's sort of a negative cash flow. They have a catheter that has a relatively stiff shaft on it, and it needs it to get where it's going to. Well, the contract manufacturer packaged it and shipped it, and when those two devices arrived, they were bent, and they're absolutely worthless that way. So they're turned into $60,000 of scrap. Maybe Larry should have told him that, you know, but I wasn't consulting on packaging, but now I can remind him of that. So true story.
Yeah, because if you've got a long, skinny package and then you bend it when it's supposed to be straight, you can't use it in people.
Ooh.
That was my introduction to class 3 medical devices. I had a 4.5 foot long device that couldn't bend, but it was only 2.5 inches wide and 6 inches wide and 2.5 inches tall. So getting that packaged and shipped somewhere without bending was quite an undertaking. We had to develop some new standards that got adopted into ASTM and ISTA so that the FDA wouldn't come back and say, hey, what are you doing too?
I knew about a class 1 device that was 510K exempt, obviously, and I think it was maybe also GMP exempt, but it had like a sharp on the end of it. And they're like, and the client was like, all we're going to do is put this like little silicone tip over the sharp, and then that's going to keep it from penetrating the pouch. And the silicone tip that they chose wasn't strong enough to really protect the tip. Then the tip ended up poking through the packaging. Oh no, it was sterile, and that's why it was a whole thing. And so then they had to throw away all the product because the tip they chose actually wasn't strong enough to protect the packaging from the product. It was a scene.
Dr. Ron, you weren't planning on being on camera today, huh? Ronald Leopold.
I guess he's not hearing you.
I guess he's not. Well, David Chung's joined us for the first time. David, will you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, how are you doing? David Chung. I run the company called Carewell Health. I currently own the largest database in the world of heart EKG data, larger than Google, Apple, Mayo Clinic combined. I have an 510K that can remotely diagnose heart disease for 6.3 million people already.
I've not heard of you before, and how does your I'm thinking about Dave Albert's AliveCore. Do you have any correlation there?
No, so Dave Albert's AliveCore is based on 2 leak data. I am based on 12 leak data. It's trained by 47 million patients, 12 data algorithm. Currently it's the world's largest.
David?
Yeah.
Is it artificial intelligence, like is it making its own decisions?
That's correct. Making recommendation is artificial intelligence is never going to make decisions. It is artificial intelligence. It's a supervised machine learning algorithm trained by China's largest medical device conglomerate that owns 150 device companies.
You need to be star of a future week's presentation because there's a lot there. And Ron, can you hear us now?
It will be on CBS News across 65 channels in February. Special investigation report. There's a lot of conspiracy about my technology because my competition, including GE, Google, and Apple, that would like to sell technology for higher price and they want to monopolize the market. They don't want me to be here.
Well, we're your buddies now, so we don't want to wait until February to hear the down low. So we'll talk more. Ron, can you hear us?
Yes.
Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Ron Leopold. I'm here in Atlanta. Hello, everybody. My background is 20 years in the employee benefits space. I'm a physician, an occupational medicine physician. Joe and I go way, way back. How many? 25 years? Something like that.
27.
27. Kindergarten was a special time for us both. So employee benefit space. So the self-insured employer and the fully insured employer looking for what they can do above and beyond just what they're getting from their medical carrier, their insurance company, in terms of lowering medical costs or improving health risk and the health of their population. My recent focus has turned a lot more, since there's a lot of activity, to digital health and to health tech, a little bit of precision medicine as well in there as it relates to the employee marketplace. So I worked a little bit with some pharmacogenomics companies, cancer liquid biopsy. I'm hoping to work with somebody with a company that's focused on the gut microbiome and making some diagnoses there. So I'm really interested in doing work for the subset of medtech that medtech, health tech, and the nomenclature. And I think I put something on one of the boards of the Slack, one of the Slack pages. The nomenclature is tough, but I'm looking for a company that has a good or decent solid product, but is interested in getting aggressively into that marketplace.
Thank you, Ron. Isn't it great how diverse our backgrounds are?
Yeah.
I just, while you were talking with Brent, I was compelled to share something on LinkedIn. Every week, I'm forced to take a picture of this screen and talk about how great this frictionless conversation is, and how, I think there's an implication for Brent that nobody saw it coming. I certainly didn't when I was like, yeah, my friend Brent has a thing, and it's like, what? Okay. So bringing us back, and I love conversations that go in so many directions. That poor Ms. Gates prepared something to say, and we haven't asked her for the first word on her page yet because we had that many questions for her. You want to pick something at random and share with us?
Well, a big thing that I find a lot of people do is they don't use statistically justified sample sizes when they're doing the tests. And it's required by the standards and by the law. And that's something a lot of people get a little concerned about because they're afraid of statistics. And there's all sorts of ways of doing it that the FDA allows. But it has to be based on a risk assessment too, so you can figure out a confidence and reliability to do it. Sounds like fun, huh?
Hey,
Yes.
Jane, Chopper wants to know, what are the implications of packaging on in the MDR? Like, is everything going to continue as business as usual, or under MDR, they're going to be stricter, higher
They're going to
standards?
look at it. They're going to look at it closer. But as far as like real packaging that I do and have done for companies, it doesn't actually change much of anything for us right now. If you're doing terminally sterilized medical devices, the 11607 standard by ISO is a big one that everybody uses, and almost all the other devices are trying to come in line with that. But the big thing they've got is some labeling changes that could affect packaging because you're going to have to make things bigger to hold the labels. And it's always been frustrating to me that you got to have 25, 30 languages and you've got something the size of a lipstick tube that you got to put it all on. And what do you do? So we are looking or trying to get people to think about pack to demand instead of trying to make a whole bunch of stuff and have it in inventory so you can pull it and ship it when you want to do it. But it's a lot more controls. I know Stryker did a talk on it a couple years ago at a conference that I go to, and I think it took them 3 years to get everything set up properly to be able to do more of a pack to demand situation with one of their product lines.
I remember now, and for the benefit of those who joined a little later when I introduced Jan, I said that she gave a great presentation at 10X in May, and my only takeaway was from her whole half hour, no offense to Jan, is, wow, this is hard. If I have a question about packaging, I'll just ask Jan. That was my takeaway. But I remember now something else that you told me, and that is that as far as FDA is concerned, there is no difference between where the device ends and the packaging starts. From a regulatory standpoint, the packaging is the device.
That is the if you have a terminally sterilized medical device, that is it. Because this, let's see, I can show this because it doesn't have a label on it yet. This is, where am I?
See?
This is the whole product, not just what's inside. This package and the product inside is the product. There's no difference. And you've got to treat them that way. So I'm having trouble with this company because the first thing I asked them was, is this enough room to actually sterilize your product? Because they have a little pouch here, which I can't seal it, so I can't. And they hadn't checked to make sure they could get enough sterilizing agent in here, in and out, in order to sterilize the product. And I said, well, I can't tell you what size pouch you need until you tell me what you need for sterilizing. And they had forgotten that sterilization needed to be on the team. So there's fun things like that, but then you get into some of the new packaging waste directives. I think that's going to hit us worse than the MDRs because they're actually part of the whole thing, packaging, the packaging waste directives. And part of the thing they do there, which everyone should be doing anyway, is figure out the smallest size package you possibly can have and prove it, document it, or you're going to be in trouble. So
With
this
whom?
company needs to make sure that the hoop they have in here holding their device is actually as small as it can possibly be without causing problems for the product, or they need to shrink it.
In trouble with whom?
What
What is the
regulation
actual
that
trouble?
is packaging waste
Being able to
directive?
sell in Europe because you need your CE marking, and Britain's looking at it too if they're pulling out, to show that you've actually got the smallest size package possible for your product. There's a standard for that, believe it or not.
Speaking of which, and now that Boris got elected and Brexit looks about as certain as it can look, I'm given to understand that in or out, there will be no implication for medical devices for
Well,
a year.
they're going to have a British certification as well as a European certification, and they don't know how that's going to look yet.
I'm very, very wrong then. Thank you. Michelle, you wanted to say something?
Side question for Jan. What are your thoughts on the whole EO sterilization debacle right now? And everybody that's getting shut down and people and like looking for alternatives to EO sterilization.
Well, it's been a long time coming. They have to make sure the ETO doesn't hurt people, getting out of the plant.
Why has it been a long time coming?
And what does ETO stand for?
Ethylene oxide. It's a type of sterilization a lot of people use. The problem is it leaves residual on the product, and if you have too much residual, that's why I was talking about this getting in and getting out. If you have too much residual, it makes people sick. And ETO chambers themselves tend to explode once in a while if they're not well taken care of. So I'm not sure what they're going to do right now. You had something,
I just
Ron?
wanted to add, here in Atlanta, there's our lead story is ethylene oxide, potential ethylene oxide leakage from a sterilization plant by Becton Dickinson into the community, and a great concern about the exposure to carcinogens.
Yes, it's as I said, it's been a long time coming. It's even like some of the plastics, they used to have monomers left in there that can make people sick, but now polystyrene's got a big thing on it because it's not that there's anything in the plastic itself that causes problem, but the people making it, it's carcinogenic for them because the monomer could get out and make them sick. So there's a lot of that kind of thing going on, and you got to keep your eye on it. ETO is here right now. The FDA is trying to help people figure out how they can sterilize otherwise. But I mean, there's hydrogen peroxide sterilization, there's gamma sterilization, E-beam, some other ways of doing things, but they all have implications on what happens to your plastic or your materials when you're using it. So
We must take a well-deserved Luke break. Yes. I want to hear your voice. It's the first time he's joined us from his far off.
Okay, you can hear my voice.
I can hear your voice.
You want to know how to pronounce my name?
No, I know how. You told me it's Luke, just like my son.
Yeah, and then?
Oh, I never attempted your last name. That's
Okay.
not important to me.
well,
Okay.
I want to hear it. How do you
Gaben.
say it? Gaben?
Gaben. You just like throwing up and then Gaben.
I have trouble with that down there.
Am I going to meet you in February? Did we figure this out? You coming to London?
I'm not sure yet. I booked my ticket, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to go. But I
You need
still
to talk to
Where
someone.
are you, Luke?
in the Netherlands.
Where?
Netherlands.
Netherlands.
Lost my second.
And what do you do there?
Small company, and I'm an electrical engineer, bioelectrical engineer. And my specialty is the part between the human skin and the first amplifier stages. But because we're such a small company, we're involved in everything. So everything you talk about, all the problems, well, it lands here.
Yeah, it's fun with the electronics, especially if you have batteries and you got to worry about how they explode with these different tests you do, what kind of heavy metals you might have. You're
Like
fishing
these?
around. Yeah, you have to get your special. Now, and that's something a lot of people mix up. UN box testing is not testing your product to make sure it survives properly. All they're worried about is making sure that it doesn't leak and hurt somebody else. They don't care if your product dies when you're doing the testing.
And it must be even more complex for Luke because he's in outer space, right?
You're going to outer space?
The way your background thing, I know it's a special cam trick, but right now it makes it
that
look
thing
like
from
you're
Mr.
just
Beard.
outside of our orbit.
I don't want to show my mess behind me.
Yeah, I know. I figured it. Well, Jan covered it up with
I
a
tried to
lovely
cover it
quilt.
up, but it wasn't big enough.
She's like a semi-professional quilter.
Yeah, I enjoy that. I went to a nice meeting last night. It's
If any of you have last-minute holiday gifts that need doing, she can whip up a quilt for you, right? You take orders, yes?
no.
Oh, I don't know here.
No, I did have fun. I bought myself a long arm, which I never thought I'd do, but it's wonderful. And you guys probably don't know what it is, but it's sort of like a CMM machine.
I
It's
don't know
on
what
a
that
10,
is.
oh, computer measurement. Anyway, it's 10 feet long by 4.5 feet wide by 4 feet tall, has a big machine on it. It's computer operated, so it quilts by itself. I just have to make
My
sure it works right.
my mom just had a plywood thing like that, and she quilted it by hand, and she just twisted the plywood every time she needed to like work on a new section of the quilt.
Yeah, I've got one like that too from my grandma, but I think life is too short to be doing it all by hand. So
Jan, I'm just curious, is your new machine validated?
it took. I had to threaten a lawsuit with them, and they had to fly someone out from Florida to fix it because it was not working right, and I had fun making them work it, making it work right. So probably spent
Dr.
as much money trying to do parts and stuff with me.
Dr. Leopold would like to remind me that I should be talking about holiday gifts and not Christmas gifts. Is that right, L'chaim?
No, it's not.
What's
You-
not right?
You go and enjoy.
Do whatever you want. Okay, here's another one. It's something that I don't want you to make a packaging mistake with. If you can size your product in some way and it's not totally restricted because of certain limitations, talk to a packaging engineer so you can make sure the sizing actually fits into something you can ship cheaply or inexpensively. Because that 4.5 foot long thing I had, if we had made it just 2 feet instead of 4 feet, we could have saved something like $40 a shipment. I had one where we went on temperature, where somebody said, oh, we have to have a controlled temperature between 8 to 10 degrees. And that took, with the passive shipping case, it took me $125 per shipment to be able to do that. When I got them to test the product for a peak temperature, which we might hit at 50 C or something, I got them into a $25 a piece shipment. So you've got to make sure you understand your product. I mean, I had one product once where they said we can't have any light or oxygen. I said, well, people need to pack the product, so they need one or the other. And it's been fun trying to make sure people understand their product well enough so that we can actually package it properly for them, either from shock and vibration and drop, having something break, oxygen, moisture, sizing, just so you can ship it properly and at a good price. It's really incredible how people just don't think about any of that kind of work that's necessary to keep the product as cost efficient as possible for you. I did have a $10,000 unit I was working on once, and I figured out a way to save $5 a box, but because it'd been on the market long enough, it wasn't worth their time to try and save that much money per unit. So we always try and make sure we get that kind of stuff done before you send it out. So you're doing it the least expensive way possible. Anyway, does that make sense to people? Why packaging could be important too. I mean, there's not only the fact that you've got to make sure your materials are right and you survive distribution. You want to optimize what you're sending out, environmentally wise, shipping cost wise, how people can store it and use it. When I go into a hospital and see how they're stacking up all the stuff, I'm going, how in the world can you tell my product from somebody else's? So you have to work through those kinds of issues and make sure the packaging works right for you while doing statistical sampling. Any questions on packaging? Yeah.
I have a question regarding your service, what you provide. Say I have a client, this is theoretical, I have a client who is developing a sterile disposable device, and they've got to have appropriate packaging to go with it. But if they don't have a packaging engineer on staff, could they come to you and say, hey, come visit us, or send you all their specifications on their packaging? And could you create a validation protocol for them that would address all the key aspects of the packaging, such that when it's completed, you'd have a fully validated packaging that you could put into a submission? Is that something that you or your company can do?
Yes, and I actually work with other people that do that, but usually we only get a little piece of it instead of a full spectrum of it, because packaging goes across everything, because we need to get marketing stuff in there as well as
Oh, no,
FDA,
absolutely.
European, and all that stuff. So it gets complicated depending upon whether they have equipment or not, whether they're going to a co-packer. Well, there's a lot of aspects that. That's why I have a design and development sheet where I ask them questions so you can actually figure out what they need to do and what they haven't done.
Yeah, well, this is a design control aspect. In other words, when you division your original design inputs based on customer needs and product performance, packaging has got to be a part of that, and the product design and the equipment and the customer need, all that drives the specifications for the packaging. So the key is helping companies understand that they need to do that. In other words, that they don't think of, as we talked about, the packaging, we'll get packaging down at the end of the line. We already got to develop this product. But from what you're saying, and what I think we know, is that it's a key element of the actual device that needs to be addressed very early on in the development phase. And you need to have expert advice to make sure you don't overlook something, because that's the biggest danger, of not knowing what you don't know.
Yeah, and usually what I've enjoyed doing, or especially when I worked at companies, I would get in the very beginning of the thought processes and see where they're going and what they were thinking, and then I would give them things to look at to make sure they didn't do while they were developing that package, and make sure it was in the right size, configuration, and type of materials we were using. And then I'd disappear until they'd get something that was actually usable that I could put into a package and do the test. And that really worked well for most places, most companies, because you've got to make them think. I had a company come to me once. They were Skunkworks for another company. So they came to us for their packaging, and I'm looking at it, and it was 66 inches long. And I just looked at it, I said, well, that's cool. How are you going to sterilize this? And they said, ETO. And I'm going, you want to put it on end to do that because it's so long, because it's not made to be able to stand up. They go, oh no, we're going to lay it down. I'm going, but pallets are 48 inches long, and you can't have it longer than the pallet. And they hadn't thought of that. So it's just things like that to make sure, or if you're gamma sterilization, there's a box that it fits into, and you've got to make sure the product in the package actually fits in that space so you can actually sterilize it properly. So,
laws of physics.
Jan, thank you very much for your input. I appreciate it. And
luck.
I'll go to you off session. I have some questions for you.
Okay. Okay.
This is a fitting time for me to say, yes, we're at the hour mark, but if you need to go, we continue recording. All but I think one of you are on Slack right now, so you can ping Jan directly with follow-up questions, or one another. And we can continue, or Jan, I don't know what your schedule is right now.
I've got a little bit more time, and then I have to go. I could read to you my 10 things that I find as top. Well, thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
As top issues that I have found, and some of them we've already covered, but just from I've been a consultant for 8 years now, and the different companies that I've worked with, I had my top 10 of things that they tend to forget. And
would you like me to give you like a drum roll, like a number 10?
I don't know. If you guys want to hear it, I can read it out for you.
Number 10.
Number 10 was they do not do stability studies on their packaging. All
Number
parts of their
9.
packaging. Number 9, when they're doing seals, they say 1 pound minimum seal strength without any justification.
Number 8.
They do not do an OQ on their packaging materials.
What does that mean?
Operation qualification, you're supposed to pick your worst case situation and make sure it actually survives distribution. So it's easiest to pick on seals because everybody knows what a seal is. So your lowest seal strength, your highest seal strength, and make sure it actually survives distribution without breaking apart or having issues.
Number 7.
They do not do 3 lots for their PQ, which is a production qualification, making sure that everything runs right.
3 lots. You need to
You have
run
to
it
do 3 lots for a PQ.
Number 6.
I'd like to just ask
Yeah,
Jan
sure.
a question on the
Yeah.
3 lots. So Jan, how important is it for variability in like raw materials from lot to lot?
Well, raw materials are a tricky one. I know when I do foil pouches, I have to buy 10 years worth of foil in order to do 3 lots. So you try and come up with another method of checking on incoming receiving. So if the material changes for some reason, you can be notified so you can go out and make sure there's no issue going on with the production line.
I've seen companies like literally run like 100, shut down the equipment, restart their equipment, run another 100 of the same thing, shut down the equipment, start it up, and run another 100. And it's all the same lot of packaging materials. It's all the same lot of devices in the pouches.
That doesn't work. Is 100 their lot considered a lot to them, or do they usually run 1,000? Because you have to run your lot size that's normal for you. And you can't just shut down it. In that case, if they're only running 100 a day, maybe that is a lot. In that case, they need to wait till the next day to start up again or go to a 3rd shift or something else. They have to change it more than what you're talking about. It can't be the same lot of product. It might be the same lot of material. You can get at least 2 different materials in there. 2 different lots of material, but not 3 normally. Yeah, PQs, that's a little weird though for temperature shipping. The FDA only requires for pharmaceutical products 1 shipment as a PQ, a real-time shipment too. And we're not understanding that, and there's been a lot of pushback on that with the FDA. Okay, next one, number 6, they don't use statistically justified sample sizes. Gotta have that.
Number 5.
Well, I want to say on statistical sample sizes, you have to know what you're testing too, because there's a difference between testing a case of stuff and cases. So you just have to know what you're testing there. Number 5, using non-validated test methods. So like if you're doing a seal strength, you've got to validate that whoever's doing the seal strength can actually do it properly. Number 4, they don't do their human factors properly. We're seeing more and more submissions coming back from the FDA saying you have not done a validation test. They call it a summative test for your human factors.
Number 3.
Size of product that doesn't fit into any kind of a standard shipping size. Cake.
Number 2.
Number 2, using a distribution test blindly without actually understanding that it fits in with how they're shipping their product properly.
I don't understand
Number
that
1.
No, I didn't understand that one.
Oh, as I was saying, like if you're using ASTM D4169 assurance level 1, do you really need to use assurance level 1 because drop heights are 48 inches? The vibration has never been seen on a continuous 3-hour basis for whatever they're picking. So we're slowly changing that standard to make it a little bit easier for people not to use. But like they say, oh, we're doing distribution cycle 13, so they're using air and truck vibration levels. Air vibration doesn't really do anything to product unless you've got an electronic component that's wiggles around funny at high frequencies. But why do that? Use a truck. It's worst case. Anyway, they just use it blindly without actually understanding what they're testing, and then they have problems when it breaks.
I'm going to need a little audience participation here. Can we get a drum roll? Just a little bit of tapping on your. And Jan's #1 packaging mistake that you ought to avoid is
not understanding the sterile barrier system is the package itself and the product inside.
This is the part where we all.
Yeah, it's been fun. I've been amazed at how I had a boss once say, "Oh, I know how to do packaging." He was a mechanical engineer, because you just have to make sure it works on the production line. I said, "No, does it stack in the warehouse? Can we ship it out? Is the cost for shipping it out? Well, how did you pick your materials in the first place? Because they have to be from the approved supplier, and the supplier has to bring it into the warehouse, and you have to make sure it's handled right and stored right, and you do your incoming receipt." And I've had people not even know how to measure corrugated cases when I've gone into companies, and you open up a case and you can't put the carton in because they didn't check to make sure the cases were square. So there's a whole bunch of different aspects for packaging, and I like it because it's trying to get all the puzzle pieces working together and all your tolerances. I've seen people not do tolerance stack ups when they're doing their packaging and their product, and then things don't fit when you get something on one side or another, and that gets weird. I worked with a pharmaceutical company once, and they were leaking. Their bottles were leaking and couldn't figure out what was going on. And I said, well, where do you get your bottles? And they told me a US company. I said, well, where do you get your caps? And they told me a European cap. And I said, do you know they use different pitches between Europe and the US on how things fit together? And they went, no. And I said, check that. And it was a different pitch, which means the number of threads per inch. And they had a different pitch, which is why they couldn't screw the cap and the bottle together properly, and it leaked all over the place. So there's just a lot of different things you have to pull together to make sure the package works right and people can use it properly. And it keeps the product safe.
It's well done. Thank
I've
you.
got a boogie. Thanks, Jan. Thanks, Joe. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, it's been
So
fun.
next week's call will be 2 days after Christmas. Most people will be on vacation, so I'm taking the light week, and I may just sit here with some eggnog and whoever wants to hang out, but we can also talk about marketing strategy, Slack, and any other way that my friends or my resources can be helpful for you.
Joe, comment.
Yep.
I like Michelle's dog better than your dog.
Oh, you know what? Let me just see right here.
Uh-oh, now I got him going.
I just kicked him off the call. He forgot that I have omniscience here. He was just immediately ejected. So let that be a lesson to you. Elliot's the best. And when Michelle starts having her own call, she can make any declaration she wants. Yes, Lucy. Lovely.
She has a naturally blonde mohawk, so like, to be fair, that's competitive.
It is, but it's not soft.
Bye.
Bye.
Teresa, thank you for joining us.
We'll see you. Goodbye.
Okay, so long, everybody.
Okay, Andre. I'm sure you celebrate Christmas. Merry Christmas.
I do. Thank you.
All right, you bet. I'll sign off as well. Anyone who wants to chat some more, just ping me on Slack and we'll talk.
By the way,
Oh,
Joe,
sorry, I kicked you off there, Larry.
what I say, if this was a real meeting instead of a virtual meeting, you would have walked over to my chair, grabbed me by the arm, thrown the door, and thrown me out of the office.
No, I'm not physical like that. I would have gotten security to.
It's a lot easier to kick somebody out on a virtual meeting.
Well, just be aware of that the next time you go trash talking in my, my little,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
all right. Have a good week, everyone. And if we don't speak,
Everyone.
happy Christmas and New Year. I
You
know.
too, Joe.